Okay, so yeah, I guess to really start off, what was it? Obviously you were the youngest of what? I don't even remember how many people were in your family.
Six.
Six. Okay. And were you all born in like the same place, or because I remember you saying like John was born in Meesville, but then you were somewhere.
Yeah, I think Arnold and John were born in Meesville, but I think John was just a baby when they moved here, like maybe just months old or whatever.
Okay. I think the only other thing is we don't want to tap on the table too much because the stand
Picks it up double, huh?
Well, because the microphone will pick that up and it'll get all
Really louder anyway.
But other than that, yeah, we're good. So was Jacob? When did he decide on this for a farm area, or has it always been right here? The family farm, has it always been here?
Yeah, he bought that in about, what did we say, 19, maybe 14?
15.
15?
It's a century farm.
It was 100 years, in 2015.
Yeah.
In the family, huh?
So you were, and obviously feel free to elaborate, go off, go on tangents, tell stories. When what was it like being born in the Great Depression? Did you have...
I don't remember that there was a Great Depression. That's how much it affected me. I had no idea. I guess we always had enough to eat and enough to wear, and I don't really know, but I think everybody dressed alike. If you went to school or whatever you did, they wore bib overalls to school.
Oh boy. How about World War II? Since you were farmers, you weren't really drafted or anything, but...
Well, I think, at that time, it was that if you were farming a certain amount or whatever with cows and so forth, you were exempt from the draft.
Okay.
That was because they needed food.
Right.
I think it was a big thing at that time, too. The food, I don't know now, in the last wars or whatever you call it, it was really never mentioned that the food was going to be a shortage. Well, they had that during World War II, that you had to have, what do you call them? Not coupons.
Rations.
Rations?
Yeah.
Rations, yeah. To buy sugar and different things. I think even maybe with gasoline, I'm not sure.
How about, tell me the story of when you lost your finger.
Well, that wasn't real exciting. That was just a matter of it happened, I guess you might say. We were harvesting corn with a corn picker. Mm-hmm. And Herbie was a tractor on the corn picker, but I was on the wagon driving horses alongside of the corn picker. And that corn picker snapped the ears off. It isn't like a combine. It just snapped the ears with the cobs off, and then it elevated them with a side elevator onto a wagon. And that wagon had like 2-foot sides on each side, like something like the wagon we have, But then it had boards on top in the middle where most of the corn would probably fall anyway, so it wouldn't fall off so easy even after it got full.
Yeah.
But anyway, Herbie had stopped and he let the corn picker run. He was just checking something. And first all I had to do was, the horses were stopped. They would just by themselves stay stopped almost 100% of the time. You didn't have to worry that they ran away, whatever. So I just jumped on top of that top board, you call it side boards, mm-hmm. and then I was going to balance myself. It had a square shaft that went from the bottom of the corn picker to the top, and that's what ran it from the top, not from the bottom. I just balanced myself as I got up there to jump off the wagon, and then the finger was gone.
Just
I had gloves on.
Huh.
Now that was unusual for a corn picker to have that shaft driving that auger elevator on top. Most of them drove them in the bottom. Mm. This was an Oliver, was the name of it.
Of the company?
Yeah, Well, just like the Oliver tractors.
Right.
And that implement dealer was relatively new in Maysville. It was Niebuhr Implement, and it still is today.
Okay.
But those two boys that started it, they just came out of the World War II. And I don't even remember, but I think one of them was missing in action.
Uh-oh.
But it didn't take that long, but then he came home. And them two brothers, Niebuhr brothers, they started Niebuhr Implement. And Pa, he built the implement shop there in Maysville for them too. I think part of it is still the old part if you go by there. But anyway, he built that, and then he bought that Oliver corn picker, and he bought an Oliver manure spreader. I don't know if that was the only thing. The only thing left of the manure spreader is the evener for the horses, is hanging in the back of John's shed.
So you said the corn picker was pulled by a tractor, but then were the horses like pulling
Just a wagon.
behind it?
Yeah, you had to follow continuously, with the horses. As the elevator brought the corn up to the top, you had to be right dead, more or less
there.
dead center, sure.
Otherwise, it would just go on the ground.
Sure. It didn't have no holding bin or anything on that had a little
grain tank or
hopper
anything.
that, where the elevator brought it up.
Yeah. Okay. Also, try not to bump the table.
Again, huh?
Oh yeah, I remember you told me this story last fall, but you had a story about somebody making moonshine out here?
Well, that was probably a lot of people made moonshine in what they call that Prohibition.
Prohibition area.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't the only one that made it. He was one of many.
Right.
But anyway, his name was John Zion. But this was kind of a Zion territory. This farm here was bought from a Zion, but not that Zion.
Okay.
I don't remember what this one's name was. But anyway, he made that moonshine, and he had, of course, a still of some kind to make it. Then he had all kinds of storage places up there. And when my dad bought the farm, we ran into those places that he buried these tanks under the ground, and he had booze in them, And he even buried in the gravel pit where that house is now, up there.
The one on the hill?
Swanson House, yeah. There was a gravel pit there, and the township, they often bought gravel from him to spread on the roads. They didn't have crushers or big trucks. They hired farmers to haul that gravel when they needed gravel on a township road.
Sure.
And it was just, what do you call them, boards. Well, it was 2x6s, and then maybe a plank side, a foot plank, then 2x6 in the bottom. That was the floor. And then when they dumped it, there was a guy on each end. They'd just take them and tip them. That was the dump
Okay.
truck, but it was
Gotcha.
a wagon.
So,
And they loaded it by hand with a shovel.
no, thank you. And then,
But anyway, he made moonshine up there. But anyway, one time he made the moonshine, and of course he didn't want to get caught. He buried it in one of Pa's straw piles. And Pa didn't know that he buried it in there. And Pa didn't want that straw, because everybody had a lot of straw. They all made straw. They didn't raise as much corn as now. They raised more small grains, oats, wheat, succotash,
sure.
and barley. But anyway, a lot of them burnt the straw piles. A lot of them that had more cattle, well, they put the straw piles in the cattle yard instead of in the middle of the field. When they had enough in a straw pile, big enough straw pile for a year's supply for straw in the barn, then they trashed the rest out in the field on a pile. Then they would burn it. But anyway, that's what my dad did. He burnt it. And then John Zion came
Right.
and says that he had this moonshine in there. I don't know if he expected Pa to pony up, but I don't think so. But anyway, he didn't know that.
No.
But he also sold it. And his way of selling it was, there was a guy living across the road here where John lives now, by the name of, I don't know his first name, Jelinek, just like your relatives.
Oh, Jelinek.
Just like
Okay.
that, yeah. But anyway, he bought on this side of that bridge down there, that culvert. Zion would take it and put it in that culvert. You know, when he would say, I want some.
Just over here? Or?
No, not that one, the one in the middle between us and...
Gotcha. Under 210 between here and Swanson House.
And he would put it in there, and then when Jelinek came to get it, then he'd leave his old bottle there and with a check, or maybe money. I don't know, I'm more sure money than a check at that time. Then he had some customers from the other end, and the other end would have been John N. Werner. There's a difference. Over here was John W. and over here was John N. Well, John N. happened to be a mom's cousin. Not that that makes any difference. But anyway, he would come and he would do the same thing. Pick it up there and leave the empty bottle with some money, and then they had theirs, whatever.
Yeah.
Of course, John had different ways of getting it too. The Dreeses, they were cousins of this John Werner, and he would get some of his moonshine from Hampton. Actually, it was a bar, but they didn't sell it over the bar or anything, but they still, dealt with moonshine. But anyway, these two Dreeses went to Hampton with the horses, I guess. I don't even know. Maybe not, whatever. But then they went to Hampton, and they stopped by John Werner going to Hampton, right on 47. And they stopped in there. If he needed anything, they could bring it along. Well, he says, why don't you bring me some moonshine? And then he told the older one. The older one was, I can't remember his name now. The younger one was Tony, but I can't remember the older one. That'll probably come to me. But anyway, he says, you can have some. He says, if you want to, on the way home, open it and drink some. But don't give any to your little brother, So he picked it up for him, whatever. And on the way home, they both drank out of it. He didn't tell his little brother he couldn't have any, whatever. So the bottle got pretty low. And then they didn't know what to do because he was expecting a full bottle. So they paid into the bottle. Then when they got to John's, and John right away, he wanted to taste it. So he tasted it right there in front of him, Oh, poor stuff, he said. Oh, it's better than nothing.
That's amazing.
This other Zion, that was another Zion farm that's right on 200th. I think that was also a John Zion, but that was this John Zion's dad. I don't remember him, but I remember the mother. She got quite old, and she had the farm, and she rented it out. My dad rented it for a while, and then my uncle rented it from her instead because he lived closer there and whatever. They didn't travel very far with horses that time, whatever. But anyway, they had quite a few kids, but this one kid never got married, and he lived there with her off and on. They called him Bum Bill because he was a bum, whatever. But he still lived with her quite a bit. But he would take off any time of the day or any time of the night or any time of the year, and he'd be gone for a while, and all once he was back again. And when he was back that one time, I guess somebody asked him what he does he's working on perpetual motion. Well, the guy asked him, what does that mean? Perpetual. Well, it would just take off by itself. And then this guy was trying to tell somebody else what this Bum Bill was doing. And he says, would that be something like grabbing a hold of your pants and lifting yourself off the ground? And he thought, well, yeah, that might be something like it. He didn't know what perpetual motion meant either.
Right.
I guess he wasn't so dumb, but he was not one for doing much physical labor. He was, trying to invent something. I don't think he ever got very far, but he didn't get to be 100 years old, not like his mom, whatever.
Another thing, I know a couple of years ago I asked you about eminent domain, and like the highway that came through. Was that Jerry Werner's dad that had to deal with?
Yeah, and my dad had like 2.5 acres, but he only had, as by the pump there, it comes into the field.
Kind of kitty corner.
Yeah,
Then what was Chris Werner?
Chris, yeah.
What was his experience then with when the highway came? When did the highway come through? That was.
Well, I don't know for sure, but I think it was must have been about 1943. Not sure, but anyway, I think my dad got like $400 for that time for 2.5 acres. But my dad, he was a witness. When they went to court about it, whatever.
Right.
He was a witness for the farmers. And of course, the state had their own witnesses as well as lawyers. And of course, we had a lawyer. All the farmers
Right.
had a lawyer. I think it was one from South St. Paul. It was a familiar name. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, when he went to court anyway that time, then my dad asked him, can you cross that highway like any place to get across, whatever. And he said that was no problem. Even like with a drag or something without wheels? Oh, no problem, no. There was no problem there at all. Not even, you didn't have to go to an intersection to get across.
Did they? Yeah. Not sure if they even knew what a drag was.
No, they probably
answered.
didn't. But anyway, my dad even said then, what about a drag? It doesn't have wheels. You just drag it across. Oh, that was no problem. No, not at all. Well, don't you have a drag with a liver on? He said, that part I remember, the liver,
Obviously meaning leather.
Yeah. But that was the first experience, I guess, that we had, if you might want to call it that, with eminent domain. But since then, there was, 1, 2, 3, 4 different times after that. So it's
4.
actually 5 times where it was under eminent domain.
Wow.
And the second time would have been that power line that comes from Treasure Island, Prairie Island, I think they call it, don't they?
Yeah.
Prairie Island. Whatever. By that time, I know they came, and of course, we didn't think much of it, even when we probably heard they were coming, but not realizing they were coming through ours, whatever.
Right.
I remember the guy coming into the yard down there, and John and I were actually standing in front of the garage as he came down the driveway, not knowing who he was or anything, but he got out of the car and then he came towards us, grabbed his little black satchel out of the car, and he says, and then he opened it up, or I don't know if he even opened it, but he says, I'm here, he says, because we're coming through with this power line, and if you sign here, and it pays $3,000 for every half mile, so if you will just sign here, then I'll go to the next neighbor down that way. It came from that side. And then Johnny says, well, I'll double that if I never see you again.
If only it was that easy.
Yeah. But he was quick thinking, he didn't.
Yeah.
Then the next time, I guess it was the bridge up here, 4752 interchange.
The overpass.
Yeah. And actually, for them to obtain permission, the state, to have a ramp to get off from the highway, that was the county's business, not the state, because it was going over 47, and that's a county road. Well, the county was given the job to obtain the land for an interchange.
Right.
The off ramp or whatever you call it. So actually the state did not come to us, it was the county. But the state wanted it, because whatever.
Sure.
But that time, I don't remember what it was $10,000, $15,000. It wasn't that many acres, but it cut a corner off from Enders's, rounding like this, that corner. And I think they offered us 10 or 15, I don't remember. But we actually ended up settling for 30. We did not go to court. I think it was like 2.5 acres. But anyway, that they thought that was a lot of money. They even put it in the Hastings paper that the Bauers received $30,000 for 2.5 acres.
Oh yeah, I look back. since this time it actually pulled up and my laptop didn't crash, I was able to pull up the notes I took when I asked you about eminent domain for that college project, and it said that the 1973 is when the power lines went in, and you guys actually, you settled for $21,000 for when the power lines went through.
Oh,
Does that sound right?
yeah, I think that's right. Let me see. Yeah. And we'll see, I think we maybe got on this side 10, and he probably got 11 because he had that extra big tower, which he really should have got more.
Right.
Instead of $1,000.
Right.
It's nothing, But I think you're right. But out of that, I guess the lawyer had to get paid, and that was who. No, it wouldn't matter much, but Hertog, yeah.
Sam, Hertogs.
Oh yeah, so then there was the overpass one, and then didn't you also have the power lines that went into the Endress farm, or the Endress field?
Well, the first one was from that substation on Jerry's.
Right.
That was being built or was new or is new. Well, they wanted to come across from that power station to this old power line that came from Prairie Island. So then they had to come across us about a quarter of a mile from the highway to the power line. It's about a quarter of a mile, I think. But anyway, they had to come across there. And of course, the irrigator went through there. And they knew all that, whatever.
Right.
And I don't know what, I can't remember, Mary Lou maybe knows what they offered us. Wasn't it like 30 or 35,000 to come across there? Whatever, but they spanned it, all the way across.
32,000? Is that all right?
Well, I think we got a lot more than that, didn't we? I think they came here in the house, this one guy, and he said how much they were offering. And then, he says, I think we're going to hold out for more. And I think he said, I'll go out to the car and then you can figure out how much you want or something like that. And then you said, I think they were offering like 30 or 35. Why don't we double it? And when he came back in, I guess you mentioned, we decided, should be double. And he right away as much as said, I'll call in and see what they say, huh? And I think he probably did or didn't, I don't know. But they settled for that right away then. See, we kind of held out if they would not come through there, because they were going to set up a set of poles here and a set of poles here. If these were new, these were already there from the old power line.
Right.
We could come around there with a corner system and get the corners as well as on Endress's even, whatever.
Yeah.
But now with these new set of poles there, we couldn't get through there with a corner system. The whole system would have to be really short. And then even a corner system only adds a couple hundred feet, whatever. So they settled for 65, I think. It was 60 or 65. Then the next time was we hope the last time. That's when they went from this, what do you call it, substation all the way to Rochester and beyond.
Yeah.
At that time, I don't even remember. I think they offered like 65, wasn't it? Or was it even 85?
We got 100,000.
Yeah, we settled for that. What did they offer?
I have 67 here.
67, yeah, that could be closer, yeah. But that we held out for, but we did not go to court. I think they call it, I don't think they even call it conciliation court. It was more like they had their witnesses and we had ours. They had, what do you call them, people? Like we had 3 of them.
Appraisers?
Not appraisers, not consultants either.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I think they're commissioners, sure.
Yeah.
One of them was a familiar name, Heinen from Rosemont. But anyway, they're supposed to listen to each side and then decide what we should get. But I think it only went up from, what was it? I'm going to say 65 to about 85.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, but we didn't settle for that right away. We just left it kind of ride. And I think, it was meant, and maybe the next step would be a court, because we went through the commissioners already.
Right.
And then it would be a court, and then there'd be, I suppose, a jury or a judge. I think maybe it was only a judge, I don't know. But anyway, I think before we went to court, we actually settled for 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And they right away said that was okay.
They accepted that.
But Enders, he had the same thing, almost identical, a half a mile and along the highway. But he did not. They went to court. I never heard how much they got, though.
Huh.
I'd be curious to know how much they got to see what we lost.
Right. And that was the most recent one, hopefully the last one.
Yeah. We had that letter laying around here recently, but you don't know, it was to the commissioners, or to the whole, I don't know what you call that, meeting where we were, and the commissioners were, their lawyers, our lawyer. We had an appraiser there, remember? And they had an appraiser. The appraiser, our appraiser, was a lot higher though, wasn't he?
It was high. Shanahan?
Huh? Was that Shanahan? Shanahan, yeah. But I had written a letter that I read up there when we had that meeting with these commissioners. But I can't remember. I saw it lately, but I don't know where it is now. I have no idea. But it would explain something about, then I remember one thing they asked, it would have been probably their lawyer. We were talking about Enders's, because if you want to put an irrigator on Enders's, then you have to shorten it that much because of the power line.
The lines, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, and that would be costly if you want to put in a corner system to make up for it. It'd have to go around this and then whatever. Oh, well, how come you didn't put in an irrigator before this? I says, we're still trying to recover from the last time they went through here. And that was through because, that time, when that went through, then we put in an irrigator. Well, we used a traveling gun. And we have pipes above the ground, if you want to talk about work. They're full of water, and try to move them or move them an inch is a lot of work because they were snapped together with a little latch. And in order to get them apart, you had to move them, let the water out.
Jeez.
And the traveling gun was something else.
This should be a fun one for both of you. How did you guys meet? And what was that whole story? Oh, here she comes.
Here she comes. I was just going to say, it was what? I must have been not awake, huh? No, I don't know. No, well, it was probably done through her friend. There was a friend in high school, and she knew us because she was more from this area, but went to Rosemount School, same as she did. So you take it from there.
Well, she wanted to, I was in my early 30s. She wanted to fix me up with somebody, and she knew this really nice person. Oh, you'll really like him. Everybody likes him. And I said, I'm not interested in that at all. So anyway, it happened. And it was kind of like a blind date. And as I remember, it was some kind of wedding dance or something, was it not? Or
Well,
not
it could have been either Willard's or
not
Vicky.
Willard's. Vicky.
I don't know which.
Yeah, Willard was later on.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Because you waited about 3 weeks before you said we'd go out again, and I thought, okay. And that's how we met. We didn't know each other at all, but we could talk. He was interested in talking, and so was I, more interested in things that were going around. Interesting anyway, yeah.
What time period was this? Was this late 60s or?
This was about 1968.
9, I guess.
Well, yeah, that could be either the first part of 69 or the last part of 68. Probably the first part of 69, yeah.
Because you were with the Carmelites until 68, weren't you?
Yes, that's when I came home in June. And then I did various things, and my brothers took charge that I would have opportunities to go to school, college, and so on. I never knew what I'd go for, so I never did go ahead with that. And so I was a nurse's aide up at St. Joseph's in St. Paul, and I was a waitress at the American Legion in Rosemount for a while. And that's, I guess, when she hooked me up with Bernard. I didn't drive a car. A bus, one of those big buses, stopped in front of the farm out on the highway, and I had to go through the pasture, open the gate, shut the gate because the cows were in there, and then stand on the highway, and he brought me to St. Paul, and that's how I got home again.
So then after that, you went out again, and you started, dating officially, or?
Yeah, Bernard liked my mother. Everybody liked my mother and my dad. And I think he thought because of our name, Geronimi, my brothers were a little bit known over here, my older brother, and thought this would be okay with him. And so he says we're getting older. He was 5 years older than I was even. And I think he was 39 when we got married, right, Bernard? And I think my brothers, everyone liked Bernard, so he got along very well with our side of the family.
So now we can jump into adopting all the kids.
Yes. Yes. We found out we were having a baby probably a year after we were married, pretty close there. It was quite a while. 71, we got married in December of 69. Joey was born in 71. But Bernard said he would like a large family. So I was helping on a tractor bed down one of these, what do you call them, a silo? When you run the tractor over and over and then you cover it.
Oh, bunker silo.
Bunker silo. And I had an appointment with Father over here. We had talked about adopting because of our age. And the priest over in Hampton helped me out, and said, well, you would go to Catholic Social Services. We never heard of that. And so we did. And she interviewed us and that. It wasn't too long when we got a call, and there's a baby that needs a home. And I've gone through a few of the couples that are adopting through us. And so she came out and visited. We were living in a trailer on the farm here at the time. And she thought we were presentable. And that's how we got Michael. And once we got Michael, it was like, when I heard, I was pregnant, but when I heard there's a baby really coming, a baby boy, 2 weeks old, huh? We got him fairly, he must have been not even 2 weeks old. Bernard was out in the field, and I took the car up there. I could drive that much anyway, up a gravel road here. And jumped out of the car and ran. It was just tears. It was just so beautiful. And then he came, and he was so beautiful. And then a couple weeks later, Joey, our only biological child, was born. And so we had the twins. There was nothing better. There was problems farming, but, and then it was a repeat because we didn't have a little girl. So we were trying to get the little girl through Holt International, and she was Korean. That was Maria. She came at about 3 months old. And but at the same time, we were adopting through a priest, Father's waiver in Korea, and he had a set of 3. And could you take them? I said, well, sure. And they were 5, 6, and 8, I believe, years old, Christopher and Paul and Marianne. And then we ran into trouble with one of the government says you can't, or who said that? Catholic Social Services got a notice. You've got a couple that are adopting 2 at a time, one through this Holt and one through Mary Noel Missionaries. Oh. So then we contacted our Senator George Consemius, and he he got right back to us. He says, it's okay, it's all taken care of. So everybody came. Maria came Christmas Eve that year, and the 3 from Korea came just before Easter.
So now we're up to 5, right?
Yeah.
I guess it was 6. Huh?
Yeah, that'd be 6 with Maria.
Oh, yeah.
When was Johnny adopted?
Well, he was adopted in 1974. We were called, actually. We weren't at that point looking for anyone, but he was probably 2 or 3 months old. And there was a problem. She had called the social worker, Eve for Seth. She had called there was 26 people on the list that were looking for a baby. And everyone said no for various reasons. And how about you? And I was over at Mom and Dad's in Rosemount, and Dad told me about the call. And I said, Dad, are you sure? Because we aren't looking for her. Oh, I'm sure, you better go home. So I came home, and we found out we would certainly take that baby. And they said, well, you'll like the baby. The foster people said he never cries, and he sits in his, what do you call it, swing, he's just little. He was a couple months old, and never cries. So we got this baby. He woke up in the morning smiling. He'd be awake when you'd come downstairs. He'd be in his crib smiling, and that was his whole life. Now farming has him not smiling all the time, but yeah, he's the one him and your dad, Michael, are taking over the farm.
Yeah.
So after that, Peter came from Vietnam. They needed homes for these children because we were losing the war, and these children were going to be the victims. And so some of them were put in an orphanage. Well, that's how we got our son Peter. And it wasn't too long, that was 1975, and it wasn't too long later, in May 17, that the crippled children were coming out. These 2 had polio, and their parents on both sides, Vincent and David, had put them in this place for help because they couldn't help them at home. But since they couldn't, and the whole country was at a standstill, so these kids were offered, and the boys were older. That was another impediment for their adoption. And they came May 17 of 1975.
And that's when Vietnam fell.
Right.
And then they had the crippled children lift. Before that, they had a baby lift. And then they had a crippled children lift out of that orphanage. That only pertained to that one orphanage, I think. And they ended up coming, I think those 2 crippled children, they ended up, I think, in the Philippines. But they weren't destined to stay there. That's where they landed. And of course, these kids didn't know either they were not going to stay there. But anyway, destined, they were from there, they were destined to come to the United States. And I think they
Colorado.
Stopped in California, but they ended up coming to Colorado. And they stayed with people by the last name of Schraders. And of course, David loved the Schraders, because we couldn't compete with the Schraders.
Yeah, they came through Friends for All Children, FFAC. Came from Colorado then, and the person we were working with really liked David. She said, "You'll love David. We have another one here." His name wasn't David yet, but she said, "We have another one here that needs a home from the same orphanage." I said, "Yeah, we would take him too." So that's how Vincent got here. They picked their names when they got here. They had Vietnamese names, so they picked names. Then it was Catholic Social Services heard that we were trying to adopt a child from India. That would have been Mary Margaret. So they sent Gene Jacks down here as part of the social service people there at Catholic Social Services. And he got the kids, there was 10 at the time, the last being David and Vincent. And he got the kids seated in a circle, and he said, "Well, what do you think of adopting this girl. And Joey stood up, he says, "We've got Tim, that's enough." So they went out for a walk then, they didn't have us go along. And when they came back, we were on board. And then later on, nobody wanted 3 little girls from Columbia. They were adopted by somebody else in Newmarket, Lonsdale. And there was problems, and those people had not been able to have children for a while. They had 2 boys, and she wanted a girl. Well, she got 3 girls. She took them, and but after a year and a half, it was really falling apart. So that's how we got Clara Maria and Bernadette and Anna. And then afterwards, we got this girl from India. So she was the last one. That was Mary Margaret. And that's our whole family.
See, those 3 from Columbia, they were already in Lonsdale. You know,
For a year and a half. They were
20
adopted.
miles, to get them here.
It's a lot closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, growing up with the big family, obviously that's going to be a lot of help on the farm, but was there ever any major incidents that happened with all those kids growing up?
Well, I think, I wouldn't even know if I should be even responding to that. I think there was maybe more incidents growing up than what the parents even realized was going on,
In school, they complained about kind of being set aside because of their nationality, and it left. Some of them did not like school.
See, there was
Your dad did like
these
school.
2 that came from Vietnam, the older 2. They went the first year to Hampton and not Vermillion, because Vermillion didn't want them, because I think they had other kids that didn't know English real well yet, whatever. So they suggested we not send them to Vermillion, and we did send them to Hampton. And I never heard that it didn't go very good in Hampton. But then the next year they went to, what do you call that?
St. Thomas
St.
Academy.
Thomas Academy. And they had to be hauled up there every day.
And picked up.
But she took them, I think, once a day, and then Halapeska's over here. They had 3 of them that went that direction. So they hauled them once a day. So that wasn't just too bad. But we never heard nothing until years later, years and years, not even that many years ago, that Vincent and David, it didn't work very good there, because the St. Thomas Academy was all high elite people, lawyers and whatever, and they looked down on these 2, but they never said nothing. We didn't know.
And then
I think it happened in Vermillion too.
Probably.
See, there was I'm going to say maybe 5, 6 of them, maybe not 4 or 5 of them, probably, that went to Vermillion. And we never heard nothing, that didn't work very good, because they were foreign and foreign looking, but it came out later. I think, it was, for some reason or another, it was more, not even Peter so much, not your dad so much either. It was more the 3 older Korean, and Mary Margaret probably would have been into that for a short time, but I don't even know. But you can tell that better, because remember we said here not so long ago anyway, that they lined them up in back of school. You tell it better.
That's what we heard, that some of the kids going to that school had our older kids, some of them, especially the Korean kids, lined up against the back of the school there. There was no one out there, adults out there, and we're teasing them about their dark skin and their hair and all that. And then somebody said, I think it was to Joey, he went up there with them. He said, "These are my brothers and sisters. You can tease me too or something. You can yell at me too." And Michael never seemed to have a problem, because Michael was really tough and pleasant, and the same way with Peter, always smiling, still that way. And then you can't really do too much. With the other kids, were sensitive anyway, and then they made them feel like they were dirty or something, and they went through school kind of with that chip on their shoulder, you know, even in high school, a couple of them especially. If you didn't go out for sports, and if you were from a different country, and there weren't many there at the time, or part black, they tended at that time anyway to look down on you. And it's not good, so. But they got through that, and they're all happy now, I think.
Just a one-room school, they called it.
Oh, yeah?
Then they had where you entered, they called that the cloak room. There you hung your clothes, and then they had a thing there where you poured water in on top, and then you could catch it in a tin cup in the bottom to drink. But you didn't have water in the school, like running water. We had to go down to Giefer's farm and carry the water with a pail. The kids did that, at least every once a day, I guess. And then you dumped it in there, and then you had water, whatever. That was your drinking water.
This was what, late 30s, early 40s?
Well, that would have been, let me think. Yeah, it was even before that. It would have been late 30s, yeah, early 40s, sure. Yeah. No electricity, no phone in school.
In the school?
I remember when they made a big investment, the school board decided that maybe in the summertime. My dad was on the school board, and Al Brockman was on the school board, and Chris Werner was on the school board. But anyway, they decided they were going to invest in the encyclopedia. And before that, the school never even had as much as an encyclopedia. I could almost swear that they had the same books that my mom had when she went there to school. She was more than 40 years older than me, you know.
Wait, so which school was this? Was this the one just down the road here at like 210 Fisher?
Where Darrell Siebenauer lives, on that spot.
So 210 and Fisher, yeah.
Yep.
And was that like always where you went, or?
I went there the first 6 years.
Okay.
And then they decided to close the school. And it was made not by the decision of the school board, you know, my dad and whatever. It was made by Angeline Henniker. She was the superintendent of the Hastings School District. And she said that if you don't close that school, you're not going to send the kids to Hastings High School either. So I guess, you know, from that, they didn't have much choice but to close the school and either send the kids to Hastings or whatever. Well, here they decided to send them to Hampton, parochial school.
Same
because everybody was Catholic.
Right.
You know, it wasn't even like now, you know, half of them aren't Catholic on this road. More than half.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know nobody that wasn't Catholic, to be honest about it. Hardly nobody.
And if you did, they just didn't say?
Yeah. But then the last 2 years I went to Hampton.
And was that always like St. Matthias? Was that always the name it had, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
The school
They had
is
the
still
Notre
there.
Dame sisters. They were Notre Dame sisters. There was 3 sisters. One had top grade. I think I was in the top grade of this, you know, because I was 7th grader when I went there. They had 3 grades. And the next one, I think, had 3 grades. And then the other 2, they were downstairs. That was 2 grades, 1st and 2nd. That's where Mary Lou and Pat went, downstairs.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, so you both went to the same school too?
No, Mary Lou Enders, she
Mary
was
Lou
buried
Enders.
yesterday.
Okay.
She just died here now.
Yeah. I was really confused for a sec. I was like, wait a minute, I thought she was in Rosemount.
But she did not go to Catholic school. You went
No.
all the way through.
Except
Public
for my
school.
junior high school year, I went to Rosemount.
Just like Rosemount Public School? Or?
Yes, it's still there. And the school he was talking about in Hampton is still there, but it's been empty for a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, Guston was like in that last graduated class.
Sure. So that had these steps going up and steps going down. Well, if you walked in, if you went outside, steps up, but anywhere on the first floor. But there was a basement. They had steps going down. They had a guild room and a furnace room and whatever, you know.
Yeah.
That was pretty modern. They had inside toilets.
Wow.
Well, we didn't have them down here.
That's fancy. So then when did you said the school just down there got electricity. Was that also like a new thing here in the area? Because
That school never had electricity.
oh, you're just talking the area had
The
electricity.
area, I think we were probably one of the first ones to get electricity along here. That was probably in 1937, but it could have been 38. But the school never bothered to put wiring in the school or anything, you know. I can remember coming home when they had a refrigerator in the house from school.
Oh, yeah.
You walked to school and home from school all 9 months of the school year.
Well, most of the time,
Most of the time.
99% for
And how
sure.
far is that?
But that wasn't far, a mile.
It's about a mile, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly a mile, yeah,
Pretty close, yeah. If it's just right on the corner of Fisher,
sure.
because the line.
It's
It's
right
like
there,
right
and then if you
here.
figure the driveway, you
Yeah,
know,
the driveway
it's
trying
about
to
the
complete the
same.
rest of that mile.
Yeah, make up for that.
We lived about a mile and a half out of town, and even my oldest brother down to me, we walked out the sidewalk and the bus picked us up. Our sidewalk by the house. Well, at first we didn't have a sidewalk, but that would be the space there.
Well, we got a bus too, you know, when we went to Hampton.
Oh,
But it
yeah.
wasn't what you could think of as a yellow bus. It was, I don't know what they called them. It was something like a van. They had wooden benches or a bench on each side. It wasn't very big, you know, it just held whatever it was, 6, 7 kids. He only picked up this district, whatever that bus was. For a long time there was, what was his name? Schmidberger. One time when they were years ago, I wasn't part of it at all. None of us were here. But anyway, Tony Castle, the neighbor down here, and then there was somebody by the name of Duff. They were big friends, and they worked for the pea vinery in the summer. You know, that time the vines, they cut them, and it put them on windrows out in the field, and then they had to load them onto a truck, and then they hauled them down to what they call a vinery. It was run right down here on Fisher. Fisher, right out of Vermillion, on that side of the road. Harold Rowie owned it. You know,
Just right outside Vermillion.
yeah. There was a pea viner. There was probably, I don't know how many, 3, 4 of these big viners. They call them viners. Then they hauled them there, and then somebody there, they hired people, they pitched them vines into the pea viner, and that separated the peas from the vines, you know. Then it came out on an elevator on a pile. Then somebody there, you know, they spread that by hand on that pile. It was a big pile of pea vines. Then wintertime, well, mostly the winter, farmers would go there and pick them up to feed to their cattle, but they had to pay a little to get it, you know. And that's how Charlie Schaefer's dad got killed. He hauled some home like that, and he had a load on. He got a flat tire, and I guess he was in the process of putting a different wheel on. The jack tipped over and killed him.
Oh, goodness. Huh. Oh, that'd be a good one. How far back, do you know, like, how far back, which generation of your ancestors actually came over to America from, like, Germany or Luxembourg or wherever?
Well, that would say that up there. Was it 1967? I don't even know, but
1967.
I mean 1867.
1867.
Yeah. I think they landed in New York when they came. Actually, you know, they came over, my grandpa came over on a boat, and his girlfriend came too.
Okay.
And the girlfriend died on the boat.
Oh.
Yeah. And then somebody else introduced, I don't know how things can happen that fast, but introduced him to this other woman. And
On the boat?
On the boat. And she didn't want nothing to do with him, but I guess she finally gave in anyway, and they eventually got married.
Wow.
This is a story I heard, you know, it's long before my day.
Right.
And they had, I think they had 10 boys and 1 girl. One boy died and a girl died. And when the girl died, then the mother said she'd have rather lost 2 boys.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
She didn't say which 2.
Right. Sure wasn't get that specific.
I checked the board and it's 1873.
Oh, 1873.
Oh, that board, yeah. Okay, yeah. And that was...
Yeah, they lived in New York, and I think there was maybe 2 kids born there. And then they moved to Minnesota, and then they rented farms around Hampton. I think the last farm they rented is where Sonny Wagner, right on Goodwin, the very next farm place going south of Melvin, Brockman.
Which intersection is that?
220th.
And Goodwin? 220 for Goodwin?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was their last farm place. And then they bought the one where where Lauren lives. If you know where that is.
No, I don't.
Well, it's right on, I guess now it's 46. Actually, one of the last farm places before you get to Hastings. On the south side of the road.
Right there he is.
46, like by...
Goes straight out from 61.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
What about 61?
Well,
If you're going west from 61.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You go around a bend there and then it straightens out.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 farm places there. Now it's one is Willard, which is a brother to Lauren. And Lauren my grandpa's home place when they finally bought. I don't think my dad even lived at home, but he wasn't married. They farmed them kids out. Sure, he lived over there by, what was their name, John and Zuswolmering. He worked for them on that farm.
So then, was it your dad that bought this farm here?
Yeah, first they lived in Meesville area. They rented a farm there from Hubert Gorse. That was a big farm, 320 acres. At that time, that was a lot of acres.
Sure, yeah.
That was a good farm. It was on the wet side, whatever. They didn't know nothing about tiling or whatever. It isn't like now they can put tile in 5 miles an hour,
When my family came from Switzerland,
Oh boy, the Geronimo family tree. Here we go.
I can't find my glasses, so Bernard, I'll give it
And
to
you gotta
you.
use mine.
Some other time, I guess. Here we go.
You're trying to find out when they came?
Yeah, when did they all come? There's something in here about when they all came, but I don't know where it is. But they populated Rice Street, the East St. Paul. A lot of them were farmers, goat farmers and so on, and they thought the hills looked something like Switzerland, so that's where they landed. So that was originated from Switzerland. And then
That's where Geronimo's from?
The Geronimo's are from Switzerland,
Well,
and
the
the births are
her
from Switzerland.
mother's side also.
Yeah, mother and
Okay.
dad. And, yeah, dad is adopted, but that goes back to, they spelt it different, but it goes back to, so just read that. I was going to go to church, so I'll probably leave you with that. If you ever want to know more about Switzerland, I've got a lot about it, but it's not all in here.
That's really spelled different, huh?
Yeah, it's funny.
Wherever it is.
Oh wow. Geromini.
Mm-hmm.
St. Henry, Minnesota, there's a church that was that area, Bern, B-E-R-N, and there was a Bern, Switzerland. That's where the Swiss used to hold their annual big Swiss picnic. Now they've discontinued it, but it's all hills. It's the next thing to mountains. I'm going to church.
But Bern and St. Henry is not very close.
No, it's not very close, but that St. Henry's has a lot of Swiss names in a cemetery, and
That's not hilly.
That's
Either.
the tracks.
Bern is very hilly.
Bern is very hilly, and St. Henry's is not. Traxlers come from their Geronimo family tree. So you'll have to settle for more of Germany.
I never really heard much about Germany from my dad. I mean, he was never there, but I mean, even from his dad, they never hardly ever talked about it. They didn't have no relatives here. I remember my dad, and I remember the guy too. His name was Andy Rowan from Hastings. And he was a first cousin of my dad, he claimed anyway, but they never visited back and forth. Never, ever. I don't know what the deal was with that, but considering he had no relatives here except his own brothers, even after they were grown up.
Sure. When your dad bought this farm here, I mean, I assume, didn't he build both of these barns?
Yeah, he built the one down there. That was built long before this one. That was built about in I'm going to guess maybe 1919.
Oh, wow.
And I think, Grandpa Brockman's, if you ever noticed that barn, it's an L shape where Melvin lives. Melvin Brockman, Irene, on Goodwin.
Mm-hmm.
He built that barn. They were a year apart, but I don't know which was first. I forgot. Then he built houses. He built that house in Vermillion where this John and Zeus Wilmering, where he worked on the farm.
Oh, yeah?
When he was a kid.
He built their house.
He built their house in Vermillion. And it's the house that Scully's used to live in, and it's right across the road from Duff's.
Didn't he also build Early's help out with that house in Hampton that we lived in?
Yeah, see, that was, the people who built that house is that woman that just died here now, Mary Lou Enders.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They built that house. Melvin was his name. She was Mary Lou. She was a Meese. And the Meeses still live on that farm where she was born and raised. Richard lives there, the son, brother to Mary Lou.
Yeah, Richard Meese.
Yeah, that's why that house is on that land, because it was a Meese farm. That's more or less why.
Yeah.
From there on, it's what do you call that, hotel or motel?
Oh,
that was not Meese land. This was just happened to be the dividing, and Meese gave them a couple acres, or they bought it. I don't know. I wouldn't know. But anyway, they lived there, and he worked for S.T. Kimmis road construction, Melvin. But then they bought this farm where she died now, right on 47.
Yeah, the Andrews farm.
Yeah. I think there's a sign, a halfway farm or something like that. See, years and years ago, there was a big, you can call it a house, but it had a lot of house. And it actually had a dance hall upstairs. And then they call that halfway house because supposedly you're supposed to think it's halfway from Hastings to Faribault, but we're much closer to Hastings.
Yeah, that sounds a lot closer to Hastings.
Yeah.
That might be halfway from Hastings to Northfield.
Yeah, that'd be closer. Well, maybe they meant Northfield, I don't even know.
And then, did you always go to the church here in Vermillion, or?
Sure.
The whole time, yeah. I mean,
All the time until Father Remus came.
Didn't get along with Father Remus?
Huh?
Didn't get along with Father Remus?
Well, I can't say that exactly because we never had an argument with him or anything. It's just that Mary Lou approached the trustee and says, why didn't you stand up for Sister Burnell when he's trying to push Sister Burnell out of the school? She was the principal, And she was in the school, and I'm not exaggerating, everybody would say this. She was in school at night till 9, 10 o'clock cleaning up and doing different things.
Sure.
I mean, there's nobody quite like her, but he wanted a young-looking girl to be the principal. I think is what the problem was. Of course, then when he approached, John Reese was the trustee that she approached. It wasn't here in Vermillion. I think it was in the chapel area in Hastings at Regina.
Really?
And they were there, him and her. And then she approached him and says, why didn't you, whatever. And he then told Father Remus that Mary Lou approached him and whatever. And Father Remus, he got on the phone, whatever, one night and told her, I'm ashamed to have you in my parish. And then she was going to respond to that, and he hung up.
Oh, man. Tell me that story that you just told me earlier today about I forgot her name already. Miss Margaret
Chilton.
Yeah, and bring the one kid bringing candy to church or something.
Oh, yeah. Well, at that time, all the boys sat in the front, and the girls. Girls sat on the Blessed Virgin side, and the boys sat on the St. Joseph side. And of course, this Margaret Chilton, she sat right behind the boys. I didn't know that I thought that was just her assigned pew, whatever. Just like everybody had an assigned pew.
Wait, really?
Sure, everybody, every parishioner had an assigned pew. Ours was always half, or a little bit better than halfway up on the Blessed Virgin side, but on the inside. Not on the outside, on the inside.
This is the Blessed Virgin on the left or the right side?
Left, always on the left.
Left side.
But anyway, she sat right behind us, and I imagine there was 3-4 rows of pews, maybe even 5, that was supposed to be for boys, and then she sat right behind that anyway. This one Sunday, Leo Gergen, he was going to be nice, and he brought a bag of candy to church, and he happened to sit alongside of me, so he shared some of that candy with me until Margaret Chilton seen what was going on, and she immediately put a stop to that. That was the end of the candy for that Sunday anyway.
Did the priest ever hear about that?
Oh, not that I know of.
Father Kaysen?
I don't think so. I wouldn't know about it. Well, she maybe told him.
Did you ever personally have any run-ins with Father Kaysen?
Let's see, personally. Oh, I think I could say maybe I did. I was a mass server, and I was getting older. I don't know how old, but 14, 15 years old. And I got the nerve to tell him that I think I'm going to quit being a mass server because I thought I was too old. I didn't know what the age limit was.
Sure.
And he kind of said, well, he said something like, well, you know that in, let's say, the cathedral or in Rome or whatever, he said, even the priests serve Mass for the other priests, or the bishop even serves Mass for the other priests, and you think you're too old? What could I say? Duh.
You had your cornered there.
Well, he always got along pretty good, considering he was, what do you call that? He always had to have the last word, I guess you could say. But he always got along good with my dad, though.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, your dad helped with the whichever tiling in the
Well,
basement.
they built that school that time. My dad really didn't get what I call credit for building the school, but he did build the school in conjunction with Joe Marshall. The two of them, they decided we don't need to hire a contractor. We can do it, and that's what they did.
Your dad and this other guy?
Yeah.
And is that the one that's still there?
Yeah. Except the part that John built.
Right.
Paid for in the back.
Paid for, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they actually mentioned that I haven't gone to that part yet, but I think they actually mentioned that in here.
That John
donated like $300,000 or something like that.
I think exactly 3. I think the priest asked for 350, and John, he whittled it down to 300, and he took it.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm gonna find that now because I'm pretty sure it's here.
They really got a complete detail of
They
that.
really do. It's kind of impressive. Yep, there it is. In 2005, Father Joe oversaw one of the most expensive projects in parish history, an 8,200 square foot addition to the school. The project, which cost $1,178,000, was jump-started by a generous $300,000 donation from John Bauer, an area farmer and lifelong parishioner who died about 18 months after the school was completed. They got that in there.
See, that Father Joe, I think everybody pretty much liked him, but you know, he was an Indian priest. You probably remember that.
I remember him, yeah.
Okay. But anyway, there was a person, he was born and raised in Vermillion by the name of, I forgot his first name. His last name was Ryder. And the Friendrups that we know or knew, their mother was a writer, and she was a sister to this writer. Well, this writer really didn't live around here. When he got older, he got a job someplace else. I don't know if it was in the city or if it was even out of state, but he moved back to Vermillion. Them last years, he bought that house right on the corner of, I think Stuffles built that house. But when they died, then he bought the house. And that was these Friendrup's uncle. And Donald Friendrup was the, I think you call him either an administrator or whatever he was. But anyway, he left this much money to the parish in Vermillion. And I don't remember how much at all. It was quite a chunk too. But they had to spend it for certain things. And I don't even know if it meant for, let's say, school tuition. I have no idea. But Father Joe says to Donald, you know, in order to get that money faster, and it was so much a year only. He wanted to get that money faster.
Right.
And then he approached Donald about it, I guess, a couple different times. Well, then Donald says, if that's the way it is, and will reads such and such, then you won't get anything. I guess then he settled for such and such a year.
Yeah.
Well, Donald had the right thing to say there because he was a trustee and he was supposed to do whatever the will said, you know, that was his job. Not, he wasn't supposed to divide it up any old way that he wanted, you know. He was supposed to just make sure the will gets followed.
Right. That might be it. I can't think of anything else.
See, that little school down here, that got closed when, I think a year after Viola and Rosemary Rother and Leroy Rother graduated. And then there was only 7 of us left in school. But that wasn't really the reason they closed. It was because the superintendent forced them to close or they wouldn't take kids for high school. And you know where the school went? The building?
No.
Melvin had, or Al Brockman, he bought the school for, I guess, a few $100s, and they moved it on the farm for a shop. That's still there.
Really? Huh.
My dad, he was in charge of moving it. They just loaded it onto some wagons, jacked it up, and moved it. But then for moving it, he got the woodshed. And that woodshed is that building that was up there on Swanson's that we demolished now.
Oh, I think I remember it.
It's still laying there on that pile of brush with the pile of brush. That was the woodshed.
Well, there you go, I guess.
That was the school, and then it had a woodshed, and then behind the school it had the boys and girls toilets. That was it, as far as the school goes, you know.
When you, I guess as early as you remember, because obviously that house down there, the farmhouse, doesn't look the same as it did back then. When you lived there, which rooms did it have? Was it just like the living room?
You mean when they moved there?
Right, yeah.
Well, actually, I guess before they moved there, this house was built, I don't know if you can even see it, I can't behind that big tree, but now it's an L shape, you know. First it was just the one that goes north and south.
Right.
You know, and that was the extent of it. Now that part of the house
just
has square nails, and it didn't have siding on the outside. It just had drop siding, they called it. That was the boards, you know. Well, now, you know, even all them last years, 100 years, whatever, they put boards on the outside. Well, now they put plywood on the outside, but that had drop siding, and that was the extent of it. It had not siding like you think of it as siding now, even this one.
Right.
You know, and then it wasn't, I guess, that many years later, then they built that extension on. And that was the kitchen or whatever. So that was there when my mom moved there. And then they built on to the north side for a woodshed right onto the house. Lean-to, away from the kitchen. Lean-to. But anyway, when they got electricity and running water, then they tore that off and built on. And they put a bathroom in there and a kitchen. And the other was no longer the kitchen, but it was the dining room. Bigger dining room. And then after that, they built on this side, and that was supposed to be then where you, like a laundry room.
Oh, on the south side, yeah.
Yeah. And then when it wasn't, well, it was a lot of years later, I think that was probably built in about 1933, because they marked it where they put a cistern. It was marked on there in 1933.
The laundry room?
That was the same time the laundry room was built.
Gotcha.
But then the laundry room didn't have running water or anything. The washing machine was in there, and it had an engine on it, you know. You had to pump it to start it, pedal, you know, whatever. And that went downstairs. See, then that basement was that much bigger, because they dug that out then for a basement.
Yeah, but those other rooms were... Wait, so what did the basement look like at first? Was it just those two?
Well, the biggest part didn't have a basement. There was no basement under the house until they built that extra piece on for the kitchen, the second piece or whatever.
Right.
Then they built a basement under that. They dug a basement.
Right. Yeah.
Then everybody thought, I guess by that time, they should have a basement to put the potatoes in. And I think that's basically, well, that and to store their canning crops.
Sure.
Rather than on the hot shelves in the house, you know.
Do you remember like what year that basement was put in, or time period?
Well, that first one I would not know, because that was there, I think, when they built that piece on the house.
Okay.
That was before they moved here.
Oh, yeah. So
This other basement here, that was built in about 1933.
Okay.
And that was built out of cement blocks that Twin Sevenol are made by hand, one block at a time. Packed them and everything, you know.
Sounds like
machine that didn't make them.
Sounds like
But it wasn't rock, you know, like the old basement is rock.
Mm-hmm.
It still is.
Still is, yeah.
Yeah.
And then what about that sunroom? Was that part of that same addition when the dining room was in?
Oh no, that was years and years later. Yeah. And then the last part, that was since, I guess, almost all the kids were here, you know, under the living room. We dug that out. John and I dug that out with the loaders.
The basement part under the living room?
Yeah, where the pool table was.
Yeah.
You know, that was built, that was poured cement.
And probably, what, 80s sometime? Late 80s?
Yeah, I think so. It was probably late 70s, huh?
Late 70s?
I don't even know. I know Vincent was here, and he came in 75.
Yeah.
It still could have been close to 80, I don't know.
How about the upper level? When was that all there, or when did that get put in?
You mean the bedrooms upstairs?
Right.
I think that's basically all the same as it was when they moved here.
Sure.
There was two littler bedrooms and then a bigger bedroom, you know.
Yeah.
That's how the downstairs was, the same size as the upstairs.
Right.
So the upstairs has never been added to it, I guess, except when they built that first edition.
Yeah.
A lot of houses were built like that to begin with, like an L shape. They call them the old farmhouses nowadays.
Oh, yeah. And then there was the pool.
Oh, yeah. That was not my idea.
Whose was it?
Oh, I suppose it was the kids and Mom. Of course, if you mentioned that to Chris, he didn't want the pool, he wanted a boat.
Where was you going to put the boat?
Haul it to the water someplace, a lake, I guess, I don't know. Well, it was different, you know, everybody had chickens. Then they raised chickens, you know, pullets for the next year. But we always had two, well, not always, but I remember when the first new chicken coop got built where the truck is now. That was the new chicken coop, and then there was the old chicken coop. Well, the old chicken coop, that wasn't quite as big, that held the old chickens. Then the new chicken coop, that held the new pullets. And they started to lay probably before you put them in that new chicken coop a little bit already. And them pullets, they laid a lot more eggs than the old chickens.
Really?
But you didn't have to raise them, you know, so we raised them every year, but you kept them over a year because we had 2 chicken coops. You didn't mix them. All the chickens peck at each other. They're worse than people.
That bad, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, they are bad.
When was that goat barn put in? I guess was it always a goat barn or
Well, it was built for a pig barn.
pig barn?
I would say that was built in about 1953.
Did you already have like a lot of pigs and cattle around at that time, or
Well,
sheep
that
maybe?
time, that was me, you know, that put that pig barn up. That was no longer Dad
Right.
involved.
Yeah.
But anyway, then that was all we had for pigs was under the granary there, you know,
Okay.
where Clara had her chickens.
Yeah.
Well, that was the extent of it, except we had that shack over there where the pig barn is now.
Oh, that red
shack
one?
is now behind the buildings over here.
Yeah.
Moved it for about 6th time,
Right.
whatever, but that
It's
was
been moved
moved
at least
from up
twice, I
there
think, since I was a kid.
on Zion's farm. That was their garage up there. That was moved down here, and then we moved it over by the pigs eventually, or by the pig barn, and then we had pigs in that. And it's just meant for shade or whatever.
When did like all the cattle yard area? When was that all put in? Was that you as well?
My dad was never much of a cattle guy at all.
Any livestock other than like
Well,
chickens?
sure, they always had their dozen or 14 or 15, 16 cows, but he never looked at them. He was a carpenter. I mean, you know, he hardly ever went in the barn. Hardly ever, if ever. I can honestly say I've never saw him milk a cow, but I saw Mom milk cows every morning and night. But he wouldn't touch a cow. You know? Not that I know of. I'm sure when the older ones were younger, they probably saw that, but I did not. See, by that time when I came along, then the older ones were all old enough to help with all that.
Sure.
Even if Mom didn't do it alone, she helped.
Was it just cows? Because like I know I've seen like an aerial, whatever that aerial picture is, where it's like, you know, kind of grassland around. Was there like some sheep out there too, or
Never.
no?
No, I think that picture was probably thinking of, there was a little straw pile. That was the last straw pile that we ever had. After that, we had a combine. That was left over from the year before, that straw pile.
Oh.
And there's cattle in the yard,
Gotcha.
you know, whatever. They were milk cows.
Okay. And only
Then
much.
I milked cows for about maybe 3-4 years, or when I was supposed to start farming. And then Herbie, he lived over there, moved over there when I started farming.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny farmed over here. Well, they didn't have milk cows, but we worked together. And that didn't work out for me at all, you know, because they expected me to, when they made hay or combined or whatever they did, I was supposed to be there, but I'm supposed to be home milking cows. So I got rid of the cows, but I didn't like them anyway. So then everybody, all of us, went into feeding cattle. And that developed from there. First it was they made the yard, cement yard, and had them go into the old barn as a shed.
Right.
And then a shed got built and made the yard bigger. Another shed got built and made the yard still bigger, cement. And of course, you know, in the meantime, you put in bung feeders.
Was this all in the 50s still, or?
Well, yeah, it was in the 50s, but it was probably more already into the 60s. Sure. I think them 2 bigger silos there, they were probably built in about the last one, maybe 62. They didn't cost that much. If I remember right, one of them, there was $3,000 with the silo unloader.
Wow. How long was this farm over here there? Was that always here too? Did somebody else?
No, my dad bought that from my mom's aunt when she died. It was an estate, but they had no kids. Her name, I think, was Josephine. She was married to a miller, Actually, you would pronounce it Mueller because it was Mueller, but everybody said Miller, so I never knew no better.
Sure.
But anyway, he bought that from the estate when she died, Mrs. Miller. He died first. But anyway, by that time, I think they lived in Vermillion, these Millers, and they rented this to other people.
Sure.
Not my dad. One of them was Jelnick's, lived in the house.
Yep.
Okay, but then after that, Chandlers. Well, you don't hear much about the Chandlers. They lived over there, and after that, they moved off here. They bought a farm over there on 205. They farmed it for I don't know how long. That's all before my day.
Yeah.
But just for an example, there they didn't have a windmill. We did, So they used
On this farm here.
Yeah. So they didn't have a windmill. They either had to pump it by hand or they had a pump jack with an engine because they didn't have electricity.
Right.
And he didn't know nothing about engines, and because then it was always the mother's responsibility. She could fix engines. She could always start them. And she would pump it, it wasn't it didn't have a battery or electric or anything.
Right.
But she took care of that,
Huh. So where was the windmill down here? Because I don't even remember seeing.
You don't remember? The windmill isn't gone all that many years, but it was long before you were born, though. But that windmill was, how do I explain that now? Well, you know where the well is, the well pit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was right on top of
Right
that
on
well
top
pit.
of that? Huh.
Right on top of that, sure. The well pit was there when the windmill was there.
Yeah, no, I don't remember any windmill when I was a kid. That's cool. I remember looking across the highway and it looks like Jerry still has like a remnant of his.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a problem. I didn't want to climb up there, whatever it was, and I think you couldn't shut it off no more. The cable or something, what you wound up down here to pull that blade or the fan, and then the wind fan blade, that they were together, then it wouldn't run. And the cable had busted, so I just suggested we tear it down. So then we cut it off in the bottom and pulled it over.
Do you remember when that was?
No, I don't. But I guess it was before 1973, because I know Mom was still living. I'm not so sure that my dad was living no more.
Yeah, that was way before I came around.
Huh?
So that was way before I came around.
Yeah, we don't realize that as much. Because, that's a long span, and how can you differentiate each span?
Yeah.
Yeah, them Millers across the road here, they moved to Vermillion, and they bought that house, I guess. That house is still there. It looks pretty nice now on the outside. I haven't been in it, but I was in it when she lived there yet, And actually, I remember it, but I didn't know how old I was until I helped clean the cemetery or something on the cemetery once. Then I seen she died in 1933. Well, I was only 3 years old when she died.
Right.
But I remember being in their house. Oops.
Oh, good. Yeah. So then this house that's currently there, that had to be like a different house then. Did they tear that down and rebuild it?
That house that was there was where the barn is.
Oh.
Yeah. Actually, one of those silos, the pit of the silo is part of the basement. Well, the pit is where the basement of the house was.
Would you be able to tell if you went there, or?
No, well, the silo is torn down now and the hole is filled.
Oh, okay.
But you still wouldn't be able to tell because the silo fit inside of that basement.
Oh.
And it was filled around with dirt.
Filled around it.
And it was rock basement.
Yeah.
But that was torn down about the same time the one on Zion's was torn down.
The silo up there?
No, the house.
Oh, the house.
The house, about the same time. And I was probably 13, 14, 15 years old when they were both torn down. And that lumber out of both houses was stored in that barn up there on Zion's. And then the lightning hit the barn and then the lumber all burned.
Oh, no.
Everything was saved, even the shingles and the wainscoting from the walls, they all had wainscoting years ago. Whatever, that was all stored in there, Windows, whatever.
Then the house that's currently there, was there anything in that spot beforehand or no?
No.
No.
No, when I remember it, mostly it was pasture. You chased the cows from down here, across the road into that pasture. See, there was nobody living in that old house. I think after these Chandlers moved out, probably anyway, not that I even remember them, I think nobody lived there. That wasn't such an old house, the one up there either. It was similar to this house, except never was fixed up, like
Sure.
bathroom or anything,
Right.
But it had its porches on and whatever.
So was your brother John, was he the only one to live in the newer built house over here?
He actually built that house in 1973, and he was, I call it, forced to build a house. Well, no, he did it on his own, but we were living down there in a trailer house, and we had I forgot. But anyway, the three Korean kids were coming, and of course he knew that. So then and I owned the farm
Right.
at that time,
Okay.
but Mom and Johnny still lived there.
Yeah.
But he could see that,
That was coming.
maybe it's time for them to move on.
Sure.
So then he built that house in 1973. And they moved up there about in the spring of 1973.
Both of them?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mom and John. Gene was supposed to have built the house, Gene Bauer.
Gene Bauer.
He was old enough by that time.
Yeah.
He ran into a few difficulties with John, but
Imagine that.
yeah, then we moved out of the trailer house and moved into the regular house, and they moved up here. And then the trailer house got sold. It was John's trailer house. He bought it, and he sold it. He lost a lot of money on it. I don't know how much he lost, but probably paid $8,000, probably got $5,000 for it or whatever.
Whoops.
It was kind of a big trailer house. I think it was, was it 14 or 16 feet wide by almost 80 feet long, I think. 2-bedroom, bath, kitchen, dining room.
When was it built, do you know?
Built?
Yeah.
It was brand new when it was put there. I would say in 69.
Okay. Where was it down there? Like,
Well, you don't remember where the old chicken coop was. It was right north of the granary. Dead.
oh,
Yeah.
like right next to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this house was put right behind that chicken coop, like 20 feet away.
Okay.
That trailer house, that came furnished. All the, furniture, kitchen, table, everything.
Not bad.
I guess the beds didn't come with it, but I don't know. Washer, dryer, furnace. I guess it didn't have an air conditioner, and most people didn't have an air conditioner at that time yet either.
If I remember correctly, air conditioning wasn't even available, like, mass produced until you were probably into your adulthood. At least.
I would say I was into my adulthood. The first thing I ever probably put any thought to remembering about an air conditioner, and that was a different type of air conditioner than this. My dad, after work, they stopped at Coates, House of Coates, and it was owned by Leo Castle and his wife. They built the building, but they were in business there. I don't have no idea how long, but for some time already, by that time. And they stopped there this one time anyway, and then this Leo Castle was his name. He says, I put in an air conditioner. Well, how does that work? My dad says. Well, he says, it pumps the water out of the well. City. No, I don't even know. I think it was a well, not city water, in Coates.
Right.
They still don't have city water, I don't think.
In Coates?
Yeah, I kind of doubt it, because I don't know where the well would be. But anyway, whether they do or don't, it wasn't at that time. It just pumps that cold water through this radiator, and then a fan in the back, and that blows it into the bar area. And then Dad says to him, that's the only reason I remember, well, where does the water go? You know, when it goes, you know, oh, it goes outside in the back on a pile.
A pile of water.
Just up by the Swanson house up there, I actually remember this one. There was a silo up there that I remember we knocked down when I was a kid. Was that like part of the Zion farm?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. The barn was right next to that, north of that silo, tight north.
Huh.
In fact, it was actually a silo, I don't know for what reason, but John Zion built that silo and built that barn. He built that silo into the gable end of the barn.
Huh.
You know, like a third of the way. I don't know why, but nobody else seemed to do it, but I've seen it, you know, where they did something like that already too, but never knew much about it. But then that silo stood there without the barn after the barn burnt down.
Right.
For 20 years or more, maybe. I don't even know how long, but...
Well, do you remember when the barn burnt down?
Well, I would say only knowing because I know he bought the corn picker from the Niebers. And the Niebers didn't build that building till after World War II because the war was over, and then they came home and they were farming over here on whatever that road is over here. The dad, you know, whatever, they started that business. Them boys themselves, them two
Yeah.
boys. And
To the west, yeah.
so I'd say it could have been in 45 when it burned, or 46 even, maybe even 47, I don't know. Because I know we had this equipment upstairs in the hay barn, you know, I had a drive-in hay barn,
Oh,
you know.
so with like the incline and all that?
Yeah,
Okay.
so you could use the upstairs, you know, even for machinery or whatever. I know for a long time, Joe Marshall from Vermillion, we didn't have machinery in there then. He used it to store bales, small square bales, but mostly straw.
Sure.
That was kind of his business. He'd buy them straw piles and bale it, and then he sold it to the stockyards in South St. Paul.
Huh.
See, them balers, they were different than what you think of now when you even see a small baler. They were, you had to pitch it by hand up, and then there was a guy on top. He pushed it down into whatever, and then that baler plunger came and pushed it into the bale. Then you had to put that straw in there when it was back over here. Then you push the straw in, and the plunger would take it again when it came around, so it wouldn't catch your fork, you know, whatever.
Sounds dangerous.
Yeah, well, yeah. And then there was two people on both sides that they wire tied it. They had baling wire. Everybody knew what baling wire was at that time. It wasn't in a roll, it was long. You bought it long, maybe 8 feet long sticks, that big bunch like that, baling wire.
Huh.
All, each one separate. Then one end had an eye on it like that, twisted, already made twisted.
Oh.
And then they had a board that you put in the baler. Every so often you put that board in, and then it had slots where you could stick the wire through because the straw or hay didn't get into that slot, you know. I mean, but it was an open slot because it had to be separate. Otherwise the bales would be tied to that board.
Right.
You know, but it wasn't, you know, because it was free of the board. Then when the bale dropped off, well, then you took the board and carried it up in front. Then the guy that put the hay straw in there, then he would drop it when it was time to drop the next one. I think you could see them balers, you know, if you went to Dakota, or whatever they call that in Farmington.
Oh, the auction they have over there?
Well, not the auction where you...
Oh, the Dakota Village?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the fairground?
Maybe even over here at Steve Bauer's thing, I don't even know though. I think it was about in 1940 or 41 when that shed burnt down here. Same place where this one is now that you can see from here. The machine shed burnt down. That was about in maybe 1940 or 41. and the shop, but the shop was all one, it was just one end of the machine shed. But well, there's actually two machine sheds and a corn crib. I think they were Johnny and them older ones. I was in school down here,
Oh yeah.
and I guess they were fixing the manure spreader, and they had the forge going, and they think the sparks from the forge
Right.
got into the sheds and leaves and stuff whatever on the floor, and then they went in for dinner. They looked out the window, and then that whole thing was burning. And they didn't have a telephone yet, so Vesti went to Vermillion, and I can remember him driving. He made that corner down there pretty fast. I don't know why I noticed, because in school you wouldn't even notice. Maybe it was recess, I don't know. He had this, it was a 1941 Ford. It was new.
Huh.
He was going about 100 miles an hour, down the road to Vermillion to use a phone to call the fire department.
Right.
And I guess even before he went through Vermillion, my dad was building that house. Well, right now there's a Bauer living in the house, but it was John W. Werner. He had the elevator. He built a new house in Vermillion. My dad was building it. And Nick Becker, he was one of the men. He was, after dinner, he went on top of the roof. He says, I think there's fire at your place. He could see that from Vermillion.
From all the way over there.
And just then Vesti went through.
Imagine his shock.
It was just before that, or whatever, after fire was settled down that same night or evening, I was home then from school. This Joe Bauer, that would be like Margaret's brother, older brother or whatever, and he was drafted, or maybe he signed up for the Army. He came out here and looked at it, the damage and stuff too, because everybody came to look.
Sure.
Whatever. But anyway, he was just leaving to get on the train to go to what do they call them?
Whichever ward or
Well, to
boot camp.
boot camp. Yeah. I was more interested in staring at him than at the fire.
Just because he was dressed in his army stuff, or?
Yeah. That was probably the first time he had Army stuff on too. He was initiated into this, and I suppose from some contact with home or whatever, and found out there was fire here, and he,
He's like, I gotta see this.
yeah. There's sure a lot of blackbirds around.
Yeah.
Did you have that many in town? Do you know?
I have no idea. I'm usually just in my room.
But just as an example, there in Vermillion, when this Mrs. Miller and her husband moved to Vermillion, when they died, and my dad was the administrator for selling the house and the farm or whatever. But anyway, when they sold that house, I'm not even real sure no more, but I used to know. I think that house got sold for $2,500 and had a shed on it, and it was, I guess I call it now a double lot. And the people who bought it after that, they sold the lot to this Chris Werner's mom and dad.
Oh, okay.
And they built a new house on that then. They sold the lot off from
Yeah.
the $2,500 investment.